Welcome to part 3 of the Getae campaign Abridged. Last time we got our army organised, putting some decent units out there, which allowed us to unify our starting province of Dacia. Then a horse archer based army from the steppe came over to try and counter-invade, but we took them down with our slingers real easy. Then we went to invade their territory, and after taking it, it really begins a journey into Germania, which since I've started I'll now continue. We're now a few turns after the end of the last episode because I think I ran out of supplies or something and had to go back to our previous territories to get our troops back up to full strength. But after all that, we are ready to invade, so we're going to declare war on this Germanic faction next to us, the Lugos. I was just checking here if they had any allies or anything, whether this was a really bad idea. Looked clear, so we're just going to go for it. I'm already in movement range of the first settlement, so we'll just go for it. And they don't have an army here, handily enough, so we're just fighting the garrison. That garrison turned out to be not that much by the looks of things. They're already injured for some reason, so we'll get an easy enough auto-resolve, although still with annoying casualties. And those casualties are actually of importance, because we're conquering now into territory that's not Dacian in culture, they're German, so that means we can't recruit our units from these territories, which also means we can't replenish. We have to get Dacian culture in here to build up the Getaean warrior class, the class from which our troops are drawn. For now, most people are the foreigner class, so we can recruit some Germanic levies, a few low-quality German-style units, but we can't easily replenish our army, so we get like 40 guys together, slightly increasing our numbers after that auto-resolve. But now we're just going to move on. If I waited for a long time I would be able to replenish, but we've got stuff to do and places to conquer. We'll start moving towards the capital of this province. On the way there, here's some good news. I actually got a trade deal with someone. It's one of the steppe factions to our east. So that's one of the two I need before I finish conquering this current province. The Lugos send an army down the road towards us, and looks like they have the advantage. Obviously we don't know anything about their units, kind of looks like they've got some medium style units and some heavy style units, and then some other misc. I ran away here. My original goal was to run away and then attack them with a night attack. But clearly I've been playing too much Three Kingdoms Total War, because actually in Rome 2, making a night attack against a single army doesn't do anything, so there would have been no advantage, and I ended up fighting them anyway, so all I've done here is undo a bit of progress, and now I have to walk further after this battle to attack the enemy. At least we're in our own territory, so in principle we can replenish if there are any Getaean people around, which there probably aren't. Anyway, to the battle. Since we're defending, I had the luxury of picking where to fight, and I picked this little ridge so that my slingers have a relatively clear view over where the melee fighting should be taking place. We'll also be sending our Javcav out around the back of the enemy army to do some harassment. Now the main weakness of my formation was the fact that I couldn't be bothered to rotate it or move it, so when the enemy started attacking really heavily on my left and not really attacking where I wanted the fight to be, I just didn't do anything. Had plenty of time, but I didn't. I guess that's just my style. Luckily, the enemy were feeling generous, so they sent about half their army to come around and attack where I wanted them to, so that's good. Now my Javcav will move into position, and will begin luring them in to just waste time fighting against the front of our phalanx. The slinger thing sort of works. You can see they kind of have line of sight on the guys in the melee in front of them. Probably getting some friendly fire here, but the idea is there. They can always throw diagonally at other things as well. Here's the big mess on our left, with about half the enemy army attacking one or two of our units. Really need to shore that up, otherwise we're going to be in trouble. On the right, the enemy are sort of doing the same thing. A few units are going to outflank, and roughly succeeding, because I can't really stop them. They've got some horse archers who are disrupting my Javcav from going in to attack the enemy's rear, but we'll be fine in a minute. Their general went around on the far left and met my one reserve unit of spears. Then when they were stopped, I rear attacked him with my general, and their general ran away after that. He ran back through the blob of his own troops and ended up coming out the other side, where he met my Javcav, who were right then trying to sneak up and throw jabs into the blob. This was potentially dangerous because their cav are better than ours. However, by ordering the Javcav to attack at point-blank range, they'll sometimes throw while they're in the melee, and two units there are moved out to get a nice throw, and that pretty much takes out the general. So that's going to give us quite the advantage. The enemy will have a morale shot from the loss of the general, and we'll use that right now as we start our rear attacks with our Jav Cav. The Jav Cav don't have that much in the way of melee stats, but they're not all that bad, and the formation breached debuff they give enemies by just forcing their way into the enemy formations is enough to rout a few units right away. Our Slingers are also, by the looks of things, doing some good work, getting some good friendly fire as well, but still doing some good work. That's probably thinning the enemy out quite a lot. So in the centre we're fine, but on the left and right we're severely outnumbered. I'm starting to direct the Slingers to shoot onto the flanks now to try and sort that out a little bit, but that's very slow work. Speaking of slow, our general tries to rear attack the main enemy block, but we had to go up such a steep slope just before we made contact that we didn't really get any kills. It still counts as a rear attack, so it might give morale shock, but it's not enough to make any difference. We've also got Slingers now setting up to shoot into the flank of the blob. If the enemy pull units out of the blob and run at us, that will be a problem, but they don't. They do it instead to our general as he flees. He also gets hit by a nice volley of jabs, which takes out a few guys. At least we've thinned out the blob. They can now chase our general for a while and not achieve much. The other blob at the other end of the line is being thinned out by cycle charges. They just kept charging the Jav Cav in again and again, and while we did take quite a few casualties, especially on one unit in particular, it eventually shocked the enemy enough into leaving and we ended up winning on the right. We've already won in the centre where we had our advantage. Now it's just the left and the battle is swinging into our favour. Here's me not paying attention as the enemy who are kited onto my general actually catch up to him because I just wasn't doing the micro. Luckily he survives that spear charge, and then I notice and get him out of there with most of his unit dead actually, which is annoying because it's a good unit and we can't get it back anytime soon. Now I just need to focus on the remaining blob, and as everything comes in to pile on them, they rout, and that turns into a slaughter. We'll take all of them out and turn this into a pretty big victory. We didn't lose that many men, especially in our main line, and that's just what we need, because this is the sort of battle where we need to win decisively and then push on with our surviving troops to fight again at their settlement. So a heroic victory is just what we needed, and that's what we got. We didn't get any replenishment in the end, so being in our own territory didn't help. We're going to move on and try to counterattack the enemy right away to finish them off, but they run away, and because it's now winter, we can't move very far, so that's the end of that for now. We can see though they're already recruiting another army, so we need to race to the settlement and try to take it right away to press any kind of advantage we got from winning that battle. At the start of the next turn, we see that the enemy army that was inside the settlement has actually moved out. Well, we'll see in a second. I start pursuing the force we just defeated, and there's the one that moved out. It's now standing in front, acting as a shield perhaps, but in this case we can use that night attack to its actual intended purpose. Night attack doesn't give you any advantage in single battles, as I said, even though it does in Three Kingdoms Total War. That's what I was thinking of. In some games it reduces enemy morale, but not in Rome 2. What it does do is stop a reinforcement army from joining a fight, so we can use it right here to kill the first of these two armies with an easier auto-resolve than auto-resolving them both at once. It also allows us to do this. The second army moved back after the battle was technically lost in which it was some way involved. I think armies move away from battles that happen in their zone of control even if they don't participate in them. And anyway, it caused them to move into reinforcement range of the garrison. So now we have the opportunity to take on this quite challenging battle against the garrison and this army, and can potentially avoid a more challenging siege assault. That's the thinking behind this. The other option would be to just night attack this first army and siege out the settlement, but we're always going for the more entertaining strategies in these series, so we're going to go for this hyper-aggressive mode and try to take on everything at once. One issue we're going to have right off the bat is that we are severely outnumbered. The garrison of the town is massive, and what I presumed would be the salvation to this is that they're massive but terrible. But that's not necessarily the case, which is going to start causing some issues for us in this fight. You can tell that something curious happened, because in the replay here, I'm bothering to check the stats on some of the enemy units out of curiosity, and these Germanic warriors were of particular focus. They're a very heavy melee infantry unit, so they outclass anything we have. And in the stats, while their melee stats are roughly similar to our soldiers, they have more armour. So perhaps they are better than our actual troops, and they have quite a few of them, and the enemy's Germanic tribesmen, of which they have loads as well, aren't that bad either, especially because all of those units have a javelin as well to inflict extra damage. Anyway, the fight starts in a relatively minor fashion. They charge in one unit of Germanic warriors to attack the left end of our line. but they're attacking the front of our phalanx style unit, so hopefully that's alright, I just leave them to it. Everything else is still rushing about, and it's probably because I'm messing around with my cav, trying to take out their archers and javeliniers, but now I'm discovering that all of their tribesmen throw jabs, and those javelins are easily able to drive my cav away, so we have to give up on that strategy. And then they start piling in with their infantry, and immediately we're in trouble. A lot of them pile into the front, as the AI often does, but at least one unit sort of goes around and starts rear-attacking this phalanx unit, exactly the thing it's weak to. Plus it's severely outnumbered, and the troops they're fighting have similar or higher stats than them, so overall that's a really bad situation on the left flank that's eventually going to result in our defeat. What can we do about it? Well, I could commit other units, but I'm still just keeping them where they are, just like in that battle from earlier, but this time it's for a more tactical reason. I don't want to move until the enemy have committed more, because they have so many units, we need to see which direction they're going to go, otherwise everything else might end up getting outflanked. I did try to help on the left by using a javelin unit, but it just didn't do all that much in the face of the enemy's sheer numbers. I believe those warriors with their armor stats, despite not technically wearing armor, will be able to resist javelin attacks somewhat as well. Plus, my jabs are getting jabbed back and are quickly dying. Now the enemy do start committing right along our little line, so everything's going to be engaged, which will reduce our options, but at least it means that not moving those units on the right earlier was probably a good call, because now most of the line can't be outflanked and they're all fighting to the front with their shield wall formation, so that may give them some advantage. We're having some issues with the enemy general, who wipes out many of my Jav cav behind the enemy lines. Their general was just much better and managed to catch some units, so that was bad news. Probably not as bad as the news over here though. This left flank is going down. The Javs on the far left have fallen back, and the Hoplite phalanx style units are gradually being taken out from multiple sides. All I can do is use my sling wing on the right. I pulled all the slingers out onto the right to start flank attacking the enemy. But this does take time because of the health system, so we need to hold out for a while longer. I also sent another unit to just chase away the enemy's archers and javelineers so that they're not attacking me for a little bit, and when they do attack they'll probably kill the slingers, taking the weight off of our frontline infantry for a bit, but still the weight on them is very great right now, especially on that left flank. On the right, the slingers weren't really doing as much as I needed them to. In fact, they were running out of ammunition before the enemy units were severely depleted or routing, so it came to charging into melee with the slingers. That's the only other thing we can try, get a bit of a morale shock and see what happens. But on our left flank, things are just looking worse and worse. Our men are being thinned out just by the fight in front of them, and now the enemy are pulling more and more stuff around the back. And broadly speaking, this couldn't get much worse for a phalanx line to be so severely outflanked by so many troops. However, we are making some progress on the right. We've got troops now right behind the enemy lines, and this separate blob on the right is low on morale. A couple of the units went down to wavering and then came back. I thought this sling attack to the rear would finish them off, but the unit ran out of ammo after a couple of slings, so that's not going to do anything. We'll charge them into melee instead and see what it does. But they need to do something fast because this main battle line is just deteriorating rapidly. Well, we do get somewhere as another unit routs and the enemy start moving further and further along our formation. We do get rid of that block over on the right with our slingers in melee. So now we have a couple more units to play with, not very useful units, but we'll deploy them all the same. And finally I'm starting to turn our last couple of units to actually face the direction of the main engagement. One unit was already too embroiled in the fight to actually turn, so it didn't quite work as well as intended. But anyway, better late than never. Now, one unit won't be getting outflanked penalties quite so much. The slingers on the right are mainly chasing after the routing units because we desperately don't want them to either come back from routing or, in a more long-term vision, get out of the battlefield, because this is, by the way, a siege draw-out. We need to be killing everything for this to be worth it, but at this stage in the battle that wasn't really a priority because it's more about just not being absolutely destroyed at this stage. Not helping is the enemy general, who's come back into the fight, and all of our single slinger units walking about are obviously going to be easy prey for his heavy cav. The only thing I could do here was deploy my own general against him. I've been holding my general back because he's nearly dead already, and losing our general would just lose the battle at this point. However, we've got no choice, so we go in for the attack here, and it goes quite well. We immediately get a bunch of kills, and the general's unit does rout between our general and the slingers. In fact, the general dies at about this point. It doesn't tell you in the replay when generals die, but his death causes a lot of the routing units to become shattered at least. So now they're not coming back. That's the short-term problem with them solved. And of course, the defeat of the enemy heavy cav means our slingers can freely attack the enemy blob. Although this doesn't really do anything, didn't cause any routes, which I was looking for, and in fact it causes routes in my slingers because they easily get defeated fighting from the front. So we're left doing these very feeble looking charges with our general's bodyguards. Kills a few guys in this tribesman unit. I thought that was going to achieve nothing, but actually that just about pushed them over the edge and they routed, which was perfect. So that frees up the unit they were fighting to slightly turn and join this general mosh just in time as well, because the other guys we have in the mosh are about to be defeated. And look who's coming back to join the fight. It is the Javelry. They were doing nothing for a while, simply because I was microing so much that I didn't give them any orders for several minutes. So they have just been standing beside this fight, watching it for a bit. Finally they come in to join it. I thought this might actually take the enemy out, since these Jav Cav are quite good in melee. But not good enough to just charge through all of the block, as it turns out. So we make our attack, we do rout one unit of townsfolk, and then we get out. Those townsfolk, by the way, I checked their stats. They have the same stats as our Getae spearmen. So basically all of the enemy units are about a tier above what I thought they were. So they're doing very well in this fight. But you can see their morale is being lowered by these flank attacks. I've got one unit of still surviving slingers who's going to chase the escapees down to finish them off. There was one unit that wasn't in the blob also fighting our slingers nearby. I attacked them with the Jav Cav and just about managed to finish them off after taking some quite severe casualties among the Jav Cav and the slingers of course. With that, the fight is just this little block, and now there's only like 3 units left. We've actually almost got somewhere with this. The balance bars now become even. We just need to persuade the enemy to leave. They're currently doing the same to me. We just lost the penultimate melee unit in our army. In go the slingers to try and make up for that, but they are not going to last very long as it turns out. The plan was to lock them in place for a bit and throw some jabs into the enemy blob to see if it does some damage, but our slingers rout pretty much right away and I decided to just go for this instead. We're just going to charge in with all the cav, get really stuck in a nice position where it's super hard to withdraw and see if it routs the enemy. Well, there go our slingers and those Germanic warriors turn around and now our Jav Cav are getting a bit surrounded. Our general's doing the same thing from the other side with just a couple of men. Our general is still miraculously alive, our king as well by the way. So this charge ultimately fails, but we use the old reliable pull-out method in that we do another cycle charge, and this next cycle actually does rout the enemy. In fact, it routs all of them eventually, and all of a sudden the battle pulls through and we win. That was a close one, and now with only a few men left on the field on our side, we need to go back to the original plan of destroying the enemy garrison. So we have to continue the battle and kill as many enemies before they escape as possible, so that we might still have enough stuff left alive after this to kill what will hopefully be a small garrison. It's no surprise to say it's a Pyrrhic victory. Both sides lost about 2/3 of their army, but the enemy's army was much bigger, so in terms of raw numbers they did lose more, and they lost more units, including all of their first army. We only lost a few units, but the units we do have are on the verge of destruction, and that's really no good, since we're going right into another battle after this. The first thing I wanted to do was get as many mercs as possible. Luckily there were some, quite often there are no mercenaries available for hire. So we hire all of these really expensive heavy lancers. Doesn't matter about the cost at this stage, because we just need to survive this one more fight and then we'll get rid of them. As we go in to attack the town, much of the garrison is alive, but we still have that balance bar advantage, so we can win this with an auto-resolve. The issue though is that with so many of our units nearly dead, they're likely to be deleted in an auto-resolve by going below the threshold. So I started doing this, I started merging units together. This in the long term is usually a bad idea, because now we have to re-recruit full units, which is a bit more expensive than replenishing them back to full health. But it means they're less likely to be defeated, which also avoids re-recruiting full units. So the hope is that that random merging will reduce the extent to which we'll lose money in the long run. Anyway, enough of that. We come in to do the auto-resolve. We have the option of auto-resolving it as a night attack, and you can see it doesn't really make much difference. I can't remember, but I think I decided that doing it as a night attack was better for some reason, maybe slightly. but broadly speaking, Night Attack doesn't do anything against single armies, as I keep saying in this video for some reason. Anyway, we do lose one unit of cav in the fight, but we defeat the garrison with the rest of the army quote-unquote alive, and the territory is taken, so it all went well in the end. Now we're going to have to replace all of our losses by spamming in some nice low-quality Germanic levies, some skirmishers like archers, and those Sarmatian horse archers who we have available through the area of recruitment system. So we'll be able to recruit something, but our army is going to end up much weaker after this campaign. In the next turn, I noticed that our foes, the Lugars, are sending another army on a strange path up to the northeast of the territory I just took. They're going towards the territory I took at the start of the episode, which would put them behind our lines and broadly be bad. So I threw some money at them and was able to get them to agree to peace, which is probably what we need right now. We're in no condition to keep fighting, and this buys us a tiny bit of breathing room to work with. Tried to get them to trade with me as well, but of course they're not interested. I had started putting together a new army to try and defend against their invasion. We won't be needing that anymore, so we'll throw them out to save the cash, and we'll also end up throwing out the mercenaries in our main force as well. But for now, looks like things are peaceful. We're not at war with anyone. The territory we've taken is rebelling, but it's rebelling next to my main army, so we can let them rebel for a bit, and once people are sufficiently gathered in the rebellion, we'll kill them, and that will dramatically increase public order because all the malcontents will be dead. This is some high quality governorship. Once we've got an army together again, we'll be heading up and right to the final part of the Lugia province which we're in, and that is going to completely ruin our little moment of peace by bringing upon us plenty more very dangerous clutch situations, as we'll see in part 4, so stay tuned for that.